was most fascinated as I listened to Mr. Ralph Nevinson tell his story to me. Patwar, a man he had known, had told him 2 years earlier about a manuscript. There was some superstition attached to it, Patwar had said. It was supposed to bring good fortune to the one who possessed it, provided it was kept shut away in safety from daylight and fire. It must never be handled at any time. What would happen if it were handled, Patwar didn't seem to know. Mr. Ralph Nevinson was telling me this story on board the steamer that was taking us up the Berbice River to Hood de Vries. He had invited me to go up there with his family and paint some pictures to adorn the walls of the newly renovated office of the Berbice Timber and Balata Company, he said. But it was dawning upon me that what his daughter Jessie had told me earlier could possibly be true. That Mr. Nevinson, who always went to Hood de Vries alone, wanted company this time for some special reason. He was acting strangely, she claimed. And so she was as well, I thought, for they too, Mr. Nevinson and Jessie, claimed to have heard a flute being played on the steamer, a flute which I did not hear, nor did anybody else for that matter. Now I knew a little more. It appears that both Mr. Nevinson and Jessie had touched the manuscript. Only they, and only they were hearing this flute. There's more to tell. It's all called My Bones and My Flute. Mr. Nevinson was ending his conversation with me that day. He said, "I'm afraid I wasn't very honest with you, youngster. The firm does want you to do those pictures. The commission still holds good. But it was really I who maneuvered it so that you could come up here with us. I need someone like you to help me find a way out of this situation, Milton. You're the only fellow I could think of who would be interested in this affair in a really serious and sensible spirit. Despite your reputation for being an eccentric, I happen to know you as you really are. The opinions I hear expressed about you don't affect me one bit. I know I can depend upon you. Nell and Jessie I've brought along to provide us both with company. In many respects I'm far more chicken-hearted than you may imagine. Somehow I couldn't stand the thought of going up there without company while this mysterious ghost play was happening all around me." Anyone but Mr. Nevinson might have been surprised at my rigid and unbroken silence all this while. But Mr. Nevinson was accustomed to me. We understood each other perfectly, and I knew from experience that once he set out to narrate any happening or any set of circumstances, he was thorough about it, and left out nothing that was vital, hence obviating the necessity for his listeners to interpose questions. I was aware, too, that he considered me a first-class listener, and I was in no way eager to damage my reputation. That was why I waited until I thought he had finished before uttering even as much as a grunt. The first question I asked him concerned the second part of the manuscript, for I was curious to know what these instructions could be. He smiled and nodded, withdrawing the parchment from the dictionary again. "I intended to read you the translation I've made," he said. "But it's a dull, rather rambling affair, not particularly interesting, and I can't see that it's going to be of much help to us. I think we'd better leave it for another time. This evening, perhaps, after dinner, we'll go through it carefully. But, Milton, tell me, what do you think of this thing? Can you suggest any explanation?" "I'm afraid I'm just as baffled as you, sir. I've never heard of anything like it. I know there are such things as poltergeists, but from what I can gather, such phenomena generally occur in a haphazard and unpredictable fashion. Bricks and vases sail around a room, furniture gets shifted about, live coals spring out of fireplaces, bells ring in the churches, all without seeming rational cause. But this affair of a flute, is something new, and it seems so deliberate and studied." Mr. Nevinson nodded. "Just what struck me. I've read of poltergeists myself, but this thing doesn't seem to fit in with poltergeist phenomena. And another thing. Why should merely touching this parchment cause a manifestation of the kind Jessie and I are experiencing?" I said, "Well, as for that, I did read somewhere that physical objects can retain a sort of psychic effluvium. Not much is known about it, of course, and it's all guesswork. But there is a theory that buildings in which people have died under violent circumstances and under great emotional stress can retain certain psychic vibrations. A kind of etheric magnetic field, so to speak, exists around the locale, and when conditions are right, manifestations occur which may be sensed by anyone who happens to be on the spot. In other words, let us suppose that this Dutchman had left some strongly psychic emanation of his personality, some etheric magnetic effluvium, within the fibers of this manuscript. Isn't it possible that touching it could bring you into tune with the psychic stuff, and so produce this manifestation of flute music? When we think of it, an exposed wire with electric current in it looks a harmless thing, but touch it and the result can be sensational. We can't see the current in it, but it's there. Similarly, we can't see the psychic force in this manuscript, but that is not to say that it might not be only too real." Mr. Nevinson smiled and wagged his head slightly. "Sounds a pretty harebrained theory, my boy. But, well, I'm in a position now where I'm ready to believe anything. Just anything." We were silent for a moment, and I was on the point of asking him a question when Mrs. Nevinson appeared at the door of the dining saloon. She stood there, heaved a great theatrical sigh, clicked her tongue softly, and regarded us with an expression of indulgent long-suffering. Her husband glanced at her with a frown. She exclaimed, "Just look at the two of them! Just look at them!" She sighed again. I could see that Mr. Nevinson resented her intrusion. Normally his attitude towards her is one of affectionate tolerance. I had long ago discovered that while he did not share her passionate love of company and her craving for the more harmless pleasures of the world, for he is of the ascetic, self-contained type, he never censured her for being what she was, but merely let her go her way while he went his own. This policy, I knew, did not always work successfully. There were sometimes long periods of coldness between them. But on the whole, they were a sensible couple and seemed to have learned how to avoid major disasters affecting their relationships. I had no fear about their ever separating or finding themselves in the divorce court. "What is it, Nell? What is it?" asked Mr. Nevinson testily. "Mr. Lumsden and Mrs. Lumsden are getting ready to go ashore, Ralph. Don't you think it would be polite to see them off?" "Are we at Bravelands already?" "Look outside and you'll see for yourself. Haven't you noticed that the steamer has slowed down?" "Oh, well, I suppose I must be courteous. Very well, I'll be along." She uttered another of her magnificent sighs and went off, and Mr. Nevinson looked at me and smiled. "It looks as if we'll have to adjourn until another convenient occasion, Milton." He rose slowly, and then uttered a soft exclamation and stared at me, consternation and slight annoyance in his manner. For deliberately, and before he could anticipate my intention, I had stretched out my hand and laid it on the manuscript. No doubt it has happened to other people too, and is therefore nothing new. But nevertheless, it's an interesting fact that many a time I have known myself to sit and watch trees and buildings and traffic, and found myself, for no reason at all I could explain, abruptly engulfed in a whirl of illusion, a kind of vacuum of ephemerality, an air pocket in my consciousness which, while I knew it would not last more than a brief space, was at the same time disturbing. Disturbing because it tended to upset the values I have painfully established concerning what is real and what is not. Call it a mystical experience if you will, but whatever it may be, the fact remains that in such moments I am aware, or at least I tell myself that I am aware, of a shadow voice which assures me that there is no substance in the scene I am beholding, that everything I discern is simply a grand imposture thrust upon me through the artifices of my functioning nervous system. The buildings I am looking at, I would be made to feel, are composed of matter subject to corrosion, and therefore insecure, not to be trusted. At any instant they may disintegrate into a cloud of dust. The traffic is merely metal marshalled into a form and order and set into motion. In an instant, perhaps, it will oxidize softly into fine brown rust and be washed away as so much silt. And the trees are shedding their leaves, and like the humans hurrying under them, are in a state of perpetual chemical flux. The cells of which they are composed in seething billions are breaking down within the passage of every second. Complete extinction is a mere matter of accumulated seconds and minutes. In short, everything, all the mobility, all the aliveness, all the pregnant vigor of this array of symbols that shimmers in my awareness, is in reality death. Death in the guise of movement and sunshine, death in the guise of green leaves and a pattern of sounds, death in the guise of human figures loving and fearing and fretting over the making of money. Such moods are always accompanied by a sense of depression and emptiness, a speculation as to the ultimate value of present action, a questioning of the worthwhileness of continued existence, and this stage would invariably be followed by one in which, as though imbued with a fumbling hope, I would begin to make an examination of the palpable stuff of life, that is, palpable inasmuch as my illusory condition permitted me to admit of the palpability of matter. I would ponder the evident solidity of my body, the feeling of weight in relation to the floor or the chair in which I was sitting, the tendency of an arm or a leg to droop when relaxed suddenly, pressure, stress and strain, and finally the persistent throbbing activity of the heart and pulses. This last factor would always prove most encouraging. The sound of a beating heart is to me something remarkably brave and inspiring, and with a little quiver of joy and relief I would let myself grow aware of the cool indifference of the breeze blowing past my cheeks. And perhaps the distant crowing of a cock or the barking of a dog would create a twinge of banality, which would make me appear to myself a figure of some absurdity, and with a brief, silent guffaw, I would view the whole vitalizing flood of actuality rush through me again, and the forces which had entrammelled me only a moment before would melt away, and leave me once more a rational, struggling human, engaged in the everyday occupation of being alive. Often during the rest of that trip to Hudevries, I found myself inclined to lapse into these, what I can only describe as half-world states, but I would not allow myself to yield to them, because I was determined that when my turn came to hear this spectral flute, if it ever did come, I must be a harshly rational individual, sensible only to what my 5 known and accepted faculties were capable of discerning in the scene about us. There must be no ambiguity whatever. There must be no question of my doubting as to whether the phenomena were illusory or actual. I must be certain that my ears were behaving as they always behaved. For my precipitate action in touching the manuscript, Mr. Nevinson did not scold me. After his first annoyance and surprise had passed, he simply shrugged and murmured that it was my lookout. Then he smiled and added, I suppose I should have anticipated it, knowing you as I do. But this story is about things he didn't know, and I didn't know, but were to learn. You'll hear it. The story I've come to call My Bones and My Flute.